Okay, thank you so much for the introduction. So my name is Sophia Pibal. I'm a university assistant and PhD student at the Technical University of Vienna at the Department of Integrated Planning and Industrial Building. And as per my presentation today, I'm talking on designing a parameter catalog for an algorithm-aided BIM tool. So maybe for our point of departure, so one of the main challenges that we are facing, of course, is a growing demand of housing per se, and also an increasing demand for affordable and sustainable housing, especially in urban areas. And also the digital transformation of the construction industry, and also an incoming extensive and time-consuming planning effort, and thus higher cost. And of course, we need a vast number of investigations by means of variants to obtain or get to affordable and sustainable housing, and to determine what models and what kind of data we need to get to that. So one opportunity to support traditional planning services to support affordable and sustainable housing is parameter-based or algorithm-aided design combined with building information modeling. So to generate building information models and variants by descriptive, qualitative, and quantitative parameters and values within an algorithm or a script, and this either by textual programming or visual programming, as you can see right here. So there's an example of a visual code in Rhino Grasshopper, which was connected to Archicad, which then generated the building information model. So, however, parameter or algorithm-aided or algorithm-based design of a building information model relies on defined requirement specifications and also parameters. So by parameters, we in our study do not refer to it as width or height or any other numerical parameter, but we are trying to define it as a non-geometric on a technical level, on a legal level, or on a normative and then economic, and also on environmental factors. So that was like our point where we started. And to my research context, so the work that I'm presenting today is part of a funded research project that I'm currently working on, which is called Housing 4.0, so which is a digital platform for Housing 4.0, which inherits a digital knowledge base and also two components already, and which is a framework of a digital platform enabling integrated participatory design and construction processes along the value chain, and also for different stakeholders. So we are trying to involve not only planners or manufacturers, but also the users per se, and thus for sustainable and affordable housing in this context. So we have like our knowledge base and also the BIM for design to production component, which is aimed at the manufacturers and the planners, and also the parametric habitat designer, which is currently our tool of visualization and also kind of a layout generator. And what I'm presenting today is the extension of our digital platform, which is the algorithm-aided BIM tool. And the algorithm-aided BIM tool aims at a semi-automated generation. So it's not fully automated, that's not what we're aiming for, but a semi-automated generation of BIM models based on the, of course, spatial, because we couldn't do it without it, non-geometric and technical, legal, economic, and environmental parameters. So the objective is the parameter catalog, and in further research we are aiming at the preliminary requirements and also specifications and constraints and rule sets as a basis for the development of this tool. And this tool, the algorithm-aided BIM tool, which we will probably program in Grasshopper, will be connected via live connection to our BIM for design tool, so to this component. And maybe just a quick introduction to this tool. So the BIM for design to production tool is basically a BIM object catalog underlying with a process, and the BIM object catalog is like BIM objects within material passport. So we're trying to combine those things, but let's focus on the algorithm-aided BIM tool again. So for our research design, as I said before, the algorithm-aided BIM tool is an extension of a research project. So our point of departure was quite a large set of secondary data that we already gathered during the research project. So we had our pilot use case, which is a real build modular multi-story building in Vienna. And from this pilot use case in research-led teaching, we developed variants of building information models via Grasshopper. So we developed like the algorithms, and this was part of our secondary data. So further on, we had like a housing catalog, which had like, I think, 60 different modular multi-story housings where we tried to catalog all these different aspects which we wanted to analyze further on. And also a study on housing trends, so the current trends that we are right now experiencing, for example, due to the pandemic, like working from home, what are the novel demands for housing? And to have this large variety of data, we use these different kinds of data sets, so like from algorithms to spreadsheets to documents. And then we continued to extract the parameters. So we had like, in an iterative process, a very large set of parameters, and then we had like, until we reached the point of data saturation, which is like something that we borrowed from qualitative, from social studies actually. And so until new parameters emerged, that's where we reached our point of data saturation. And of course, there were numerous multiple mentions of parameters. And we had to go like into a phase of reduction and normalization. So highly similar or identical parameters were like clustered or put together. And then in the cataloging phase, we tried to identify the relations between the parameters. So they are clustered and in the form of a spreadsheet, and then we segregated it into superordinate category. So we had like on a room level, on a building unit level, or on a dwelling unit level, and on the building unit level. And we had our labels, we had our parameters, we had our qualitative variables, and also the preliminary requirements, but I will get to that a little later on. So to our results, that's like a graphic of what we did. So we had a room, and then we identified light, the floor area, ventilation, thermal comfort, openings, connections, and then we got a level deeper, and we set our parameter. Okay, our label is like area, our parameter is the floor area, our qualitative variable is the aspect ratio, the proportions, the furnishing, or in terms of openings, the structural openings. Is it a door? Is it a window? What do we need to define by that? And in terms of the dwelling unit, we identified the mandatory rooms and the supplementary rooms. So the total usable area was subdivided into that. And then we had like our mandatory rooms. Of course, a dwelling unit has to have at least one room. That's kind of obvious, yeah? But in relation to that, it must have a kitchen, it must have this, it must have that. And that was our preliminary requirement for that. And also for the building complex or the building unit in terms of technical building equipment, in terms of general requirements or planning factors, engineering factors, so like the structure type, which was a parameter, and the superordinate label is engineering factors, and also the qualitative variables. And what we are doing with this, so for the contribution of the algorithm Aided BIM tool, it aims, as I said before, at the semi-automated generation of BIM models based on non-geometric, technical, legal, economic parameters in this parameter catalog. And the objective of this study was not, or the objective of the study was to develop the properties of theoretical concepts and categories inside this catalog to further on work with it. Of course, we had our limitations due to the exploratory approach. So like the state of data saturation is not measurable. So it was like we did a couple of iterations, and at some point we didn't find any new parameters. And also the limitation of housing specific parameters, because our pilot use case, which was our very point of departure, is a very specific kind of project, because it's a joint building venture. So it's like the owners of the building are at the same time the owners, the landlords, and the tenant. So it's a specific model that we have in Vienna, which is emerging right now. And because of these limitations and what we found, we further suppose research, especially in the analysis of normative, legal, and technical sources for the definition of the requirements and the constraints of the parameters that we identified and found. So following questions are what we are trying to what we're trying to answer in future research. So how must the requirements and constraints be formulated that deal with rules, conditions, and limits of the identified parameters in this catalog, so the values and the preliminary requirements can be found? And how must the developed constraints be utilized to create a set of rules or like a guideline that cover the elementary areas of the design, yeah? So we are trying to use our parameter catalog and identify sources, so legally binding technical literature, also evaluation systems, and extract the constraints related to the parameters and further on cluster them and define them into rule sets, so it can be the guideline to program or to script our algorithm-aided tool, which is connected to BIM in the end. Yeah? So thank you for your attention.